Well, let's make a start. I'm very excited about this webinar this afternoon. I have some idea about where we're going in this conversation, but the main reason I'm excited is that I know and respect very greatly the three people who are contributing today. So without me saying anything more, I'd like to introduce you to Tom and Ben and Hannah. So if you'd like to spotlight them, please, Nick, and get rid of me. Over to you, Tom, who's going to be kind of facilitating this conversation.
Bless you, Mike. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining us. Hope you had a nice lunch and enjoyed your reflection time this morning. I'm sure it was a blessing. I was really encouraged and challenged by the session this morning. Thank you to those who were part of that. Hey, this afternoon we've got an hour to solve all of your digital mission questions and problems. So plenty of time, I'm sure. Now, the reality is that what actually we're going to do for the next hour is two guests who we've got with us are going to share for a few moments some of their thoughts and insights to kind of stimulate conversation. While that's happening, what we would love you to do is post your questions on the chat function of Zoom, which hopefully you know how to do by now. And my job then is to kind of turn those comments and questions into kind of one or two questions for these great people who've got lots of wisdom to share. So the more questions you fire into the chat, the better this conversation will be, essentially. But let me just introduce to you who we have with us. I'll introduce myself first. My name's Tom. I lead a church called Connect Church up in North Lincolnshire, sunny, snowy, scunny today. A church that was known as Scunthorpe Baptist Church. Some of you may have known it as that before, now called Connect Church. One church in two locations here in town. We also have Ben Haldane with us, who some of you might know often sits to the side of me at conference doing tech with me. Ben is the assistant minister at Barrow Baptist Church and a wonderful friend who I've known for 12 years or so. He was an usher at my wedding, in fact. And we've also got Hannah Fleming here with us, who we're really pleased is joining us from the southwest, where there's no snow. I'm told there's no snow in Plymouth today. But Hannah is a digital missioner for the Southwest Baptist Association. So a real expert in this field, has got lots to share with us today. So I'm going to ask them give them an opportunity just to share a few opening thoughts with us. And then we're going to go into kind of Q&A that I'll lead. So rather than you unmuting yourself and asking questions, it's all through chat so that we can kind of turn them into succinct questions for these guys to help them maximize the time that we've got. So we're hoping this is going to be a spirit-led, practical, inspiring kind of hour together as we just think about digital. Just to say, we're coming into this with two assumptions, really. One is that you're already online in some capacity. So we're expecting there's probably not anybody here now who's not online at all, as in you wouldn't have a website or a social media platform, we're doing Zoom calls or anything. We're all probably online already. So we're making that assumption. The second assumption we're making is that you're part of this conversation because you see your online presence, whatever that is, as a missional opportunity, whether that's simply a website or whether that's doing whole services, whole churches based online. The two assumptions we're making as we talk today are that you are already online in some way, though you may want to be more, and that you see that as a missional opportunity. And that's why we're talking today. So I introduced Hannah and said that her title was Digital Missioner for the Southwest. So maybe to kick us off, and do get your questions coming in as soon as Hannah starts sharing. Hannah, great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful, thank you. Kick us off by sharing with us, just for a few moments, what do we mean by digital mission and why is it important? Why is it an important opportunity for us?
So I will say this is my thinking behind it. This is not a dictionary definition. It's sort of pieces that I'm pulling together sort of over the years and as I meet and get to share with more people. So thinking about mission and missionaries, the definition I found of what is mission is missions involve sending individuals and groups across boundaries, most commonly geographical boundaries, to carry on evangelism or other activities such as educational or hospital work. So for me, it's about thinking, well, how is that, rather than being geographical movement, virtual movement, how are we using it to share the gospel and not just sort of evangelize, but actually be a presence within community, within people's lives, and actually saying the church is here wherever you are in life and wherever you are physically. A sort of biblical link that's really been sort of powerful for me over the last 12 months has been especially the Great Commission. So Matthew 28:16-20, where Jesus said to go out and make disciples, go out and make disciples, teaching them everything that he had commanded. We should use digital to equip us to do this, to go out beyond just the pews and the four walls of our churches, but to go out into the community. But also when Jesus went and sort of recruited the disciples and connected with them, he used the language, the jobs and the culture of their day. So he called them fishers of men because they were fishermen. He used their language for them to understand how he would use them. Digital is the means of communications for the 21st century. There's no avoiding that. And in the last 11-ish months has sort of shown us that we need to be connected. We can't rely on being able to meet physically all the time, because actually not everyone can. And could you imagine what the pandemic would have been like sort of 100 years ago, where we weren't able to connect and keep in contact with families and communicate? So we can't ignore it. It's how people communicate, it's how they learn, how they educate, and how they entertain. We use it for work, for personal, videos, pictures, text. There's so much that we can do with it, and it's how we communicate now. But it goes beyond the four corners of the world. So our missionaries, physically and geographically, they could go to the four corners and across the world, wherever. That actually can be quite financially costly. Not everyone is able to do it time-wise, finance or physically. There can be so many barriers. Digital allows you to connect with people for practically free. It does take time, but actually anyone can do it from wherever they are. And it's not just about sort of connecting with current congregations now. So it's not just about preaching to the choir and those who are already in the pews. It's about connecting with new people, those who maybe tried church and not stayed for whatever reason, those who've grown up in church and maybe drifted over the years, tried, moved to different cities for university and not found quite the right church for them. But it's and actually it's really important for me, it's about those who've never been before. How can we kind of give a glimpse into what church life is about, what Jesus is about, what God is about, and sort of the huge life-changing, eternal life-giving gift that God's given us? How can we sort of use social to share that? It's not just about a Sunday morning, but from Monday to Saturday. Social's 24/7, our lives are 24/7. There are 167 hours in the week beyond just the 1 hour of a Sunday service. How can you use it? Social media offers so many creative ways to express ourselves. How can we use it for the glory of the kingdom? And my final point is it's not just either or. It's not just about we have to be online and we can't do anything physically. Maybe in some areas, in some missionary or ministry projects, that doesn't quite work. It's another part of our church life. It's the body of Christ. That actually, it's not all online, because that doesn't reach everyone. That doesn't satisfy everyone's needs for church. But it's a necessity and an integral part of church life. And that's kind of my very long-winded answer to that question.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much. A really helpful overview of the space for the digital mission. And Ben, it'd be really helpful for you just to help us think about the potential. So what would you say is the potential for using digital across the life of the church, across the mission of the church? And you have no audio.
That's a good start on digital stuff, isn't it? My headphone mics aren't working, so that's great.
That sound guy for conference has got no sound.
Yeah. Typical. Yeah, I'll keep mine short because there's lots of questions coming in, which is great. Potential in two ways, kind of what can we use it for in the life of the church, and how can we do that? Now, I've seen all the questions come up. There are some on practicalities. We're going to avoid a lot of the specifics today because there are videos and things you can find online if you want to know how to on some stuff. But I think there is a huge scope, even for the smallest of churches. You don't need fancy gear or in-depth knowledge to actually start on this journey. I think the important thing is to think about what are we wanting to do as a church, and who are we wanting to reach? And in the who are we wanting to reach, I'd say so many people now are online in some form. I think you can kind of assume, I'm picking a number out of hat here so no one gets offended, but most people under 60 and many over are online in some form and will be accessing stuff. So it will be a lot of a lot of people that can access things out there. And in thinking what we do as a church, you might have different ways your church is set up, but if we think about three areas, outreach, discipleship, and kind of building community, they're three probably core areas of each of our churches. And each of those things can have some form of online version or online way we can do things, ways to outreach through social media, through things we're putting out, through whether it's doing an online Alpha course or some testimony things that we put out there. Discipleship, we've Zoom courses can happen that can actually connect with people that maybe for childcare purposes or anything can't come to stuff in your building. And ways of building community as well, which we'll get into a bit more. And we said about that wide reach, but the thing to recognize is people still engage really well with stuff that's local to them. I don't know if you've looked at videos online. If there's an amateur video that people have done of something, if it's from somewhere far away, you might not pay much attention, but if it's in your hometown, you might look at it and see what's going on. And so there is still that local aspect to being online. But just say on the practicalities of things, say we're not going to go in depth with how to do all this because we could take forever on that. But if you have a device, something to log on with, set up some accounts on things, use a semi-decent phone, you're already there. To be honest, there's a big jump beyond that. And if you have a phone and you have some accounts, you can do a lot of things. And it's only really if you want to jump a lot further that you need to start thinking of getting fancy gear or having big editing softwares. If you have that basic stuff, you can do quite a bit from that point. So I think it'd be good. I'll finish there so we can get into some of the questions.
Really helpful, thanks, Ben. Yeah, there's lots of good questions, and I guess one that would link into that really well would be this initial question around. So for most of us, last March was a kind of jump online as fast as possible and keep ourselves connected, keep ourselves online, keep ourselves involved in church in some way. And so, forgive the language, but we might call that like maintenance, like let's just maintain what we have. But I guess what we're trying to talk about is how do we move from that maintenance space to a missional space, which brings in that question of hybrid. So how does what we're doing not just replace until we can do something else, but actually we're talking about using online for mission long term, probably. Do either of you want to say anything about the hybrid space? How can online digital mission complement in-person gatherings? How can it kind of work alongside that? Is it to replace it all? Any thoughts on that? Go on, Ben.
I think when we were discussing what we might talk about today, we wondered about going in depth with Sunday mornings, and there's definitely wider conversations about Sunday mornings, and each of us will have to work out how we do that. When we're back in the building and potentially people have the freedom to share stuff, is that right to have that freely publicly available, or how do we do that? Do we have people that might choose to be at home rather than coming in? And there's lots of things around that. Part of what today is a wider conversation of what else can we do, not just about how we do Sundays well, but it is, again, it's one of these, what can you cover in a short time? It is a really difficult one. And I know here we're having those conversations of what will Sundays look like? Will we be live streaming? Will we be trying to engage as much as we do? I think one of the benefits at the minute of being just behind a camera is you connect more directly to people on the other side. Once we start doing people are on stage talking to people in a building, it becomes a bit of a observer mentality that might not be so helpful. And it might be that actually the decision is, let's do something specific for online and specific for in the building, and they might be separate. But there is lots of other stuff which we'll kind of go into, which can be done alongside Sunday mornings.
Very helpful. Hannah, do you want to add anything to that at all?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with what Ben said. I think it's, for me, I'm not a minister or a vicar, so I kind of, other than posting the services, I don't almost sort of think of Sunday morning services as part of what is a huge part for me. It is about how we do it kind of throughout the week, and I think, again, as Ben said, like, it's going to be really challenging when we do have that sort of the options, but it's going, well, okay, Sunday mornings is how it is, and actually many, most people have missed it, and so there's no need to kind of stop doing a Sunday service as it was, as much as we can do, but almost going, well, could in the evening, when there's a better chance for discussion, is that where then you can do it online, and actually you can sort of like have it as an added bolt on to what was discussed in the morning in the service, where you don't have that opportunity to converse in the same way that maybe we've got now, but it's sort of like seeing it as a kind of added tool, and how we can utilize being able to connect with people in different ways.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think that's really helpful, the difference between, someone asked the question, the difference between digital mission and online church. Online church is probably a set period of time, maybe an hour, where you are doing a service, whereas digital mission is essentially 24/7, in that some of your platforms online are live all the time. So somebody can check your website out at 3 a.m. when they're looking out for a church or something. Your digital presence is this kind of 24/7 thing, whereas your service is probably more of a moment in time. Of course, online, people might be watching your services not on Sunday at 10 o'clock or whatever, but you'll know, those of you who watch your views, that drops dramatically and then it's the odd one. Whereas your website hits are 24/7 for the rest of its life. So online church and digital mission, we're thinking more the holistic whole time of who we are, being engaging with people online. Then one of the things that you said was it's a space for doing community. We can use digital mission to create community. And I suppose for most people, including myself, that's something that's a big challenge, because a lot of it can feel like I'm talking to a camera, somebody's watching it another time. So I wonder if we could just tease out a little bit what we mean by how can you create community in a digital mission space.
Yeah, I'll throw that one to Hannah, because I know you've looked a lot more about
that. Sorry, phrase the question again, just.
So the digital mission and our online presence, if you like, how we can use it not just to deliver content, but how it can be a platform for building community.
Right. So I think it's about sort of almost putting the power in the people. So sort of if we took an example of kind of a Facebook group, that's, again, most people are on Facebook, and using the group functions within the page of your church and having the groups, it's a great way to sort of connect with people. They're already on Facebook. When they're on there for non-church reasons, they'll get a notification, and then they go into sort of think about church environment. But also, actually, the resources are all there in terms of the background logistics. You're not having to set up a forum or a back-end space within your website. So utilising actually what Facebook is offering, but about saying kind of, actually, are there people, the worship leader, they're not able to actually do worship at the moment. Could they do some recordings of some music, which is great, and maybe it's a bit tricky to share that online, but actually could they, little videos be shared within the group? Could you actually kind of crowdsource, let's create a church YouTube worship playlist that sort of has everyone chipping in with their favorite worship song, explaining why it is, and then because people have sort of, because there's been a call to action, they've answered, they felt invested, they want to then engage with the posts then. But it's not the vicar or the minister being the only one that's posting, having different people sharing stuff. So is there someone who's particularly has kids and families ministry on their heart? Are they able to share some resources for some fun activities to do in half term, because actually we can't do all the things we were going to do? And then kind of enabling it to be the people, because again, community doesn't work if just one person's speaking, it needs to be everyone. So getting different people, but also asking different things. So different means whether it's a video or just a post, or let's just all share a picture of what we're loving today. And about actually, it's that kind of keeping people on their toes of what they're expecting to see. It's not always just one long, very well written but long written post that actually just becomes quite kind of heavy to digest on a Monday morning.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think there's definitely a sense of intentionality needed in this. Like, we need to do that in church generally, and we recognise that. But online, there needs to be much more intentional things, and having people ready to, if you've got a live service online at the minute, having some people that will engage in comments and get things going. And I've just seen something saying, is this just about existing church community? But we want to build wider community with people. And it's the same thing really, in that if we're putting things out publicly, if we're putting things out on our social media, or we're putting services out, is someone making sure that there is engagement there, that there is people that could respond if people do comment, or can say, is there a free way that people can contact you as well, that's quite clear, and not just go and find out about this, or go find our website, or do this, but are we responding to people at the time? And it is a role, particularly at the minute when we've not got in-person church, it's a role that someone can be properly engaging with this. But going forward as well, it's not just throwing up things online and hoping that they fall somewhere, but following that up. And if people are interested, just by putting a like or a comment, they can be contacted. And actually, the thing of social media, which sometimes scares us all, is there's a lot of details out there and there's a lot of contact, but it does mean you can contact people directly. And if someone likes a post that says we've got an alpha course, then you can message them and say, do you want to come? And actually there's that intentionality of not just leaving it hanging, but going there and seeing where people are at.
That's really good. I think one thing I would say about that whole conversation is, when we talk about building community, we have to be careful that what we don't accidentally mean is build a place where they can come and do what we are doing. And so it has to be a two-directional thing, building community. And Facebook, for example, just as one example, is a great platform to do that, because your church, quite literally, you have to think of your church having a voice, has a tone of voice, it has a personality on its online presence. So for example, your Facebook can have a personality that says, this is a notice board. We just want you to either come or not. That's all we're doing, is just advertising something. Or it can have a personality from a value that says, we really care about our community. And so as a church, you can be praying for your schools by posting on their Facebook page, saying, we are praying for your school, anything we can pray for. You can do that as a church, when you think of yourself having a voice and literally having a direct line to them. And as Ben said, when someone likes your post, you can follow up instantly and say, thanks for liking that post. Is there anything if it might have been about prayer, can we pray for you? Is there anything we can pray for? That's a two-way building of community, rather than a come to our event and be part of the community. And it's really helpful. Ben, you can say something. I
was just going to say, I say that as someone who's not great at doing that much, and recognizing that there needs to be that push behind it, and you need to know what you're going for with that to really push into that, because it is effort. And that's why it shouldn't really be down to just you as the minister actually having find someone who does spend a lot of their time on social media anyway. They're likely to default and go on it and comment on stuff. I don't go on that much to ever comment on anything, so I'm not good at doing that sort of replying. You find someone that is on Instagram a lot, that is on Facebook a lot, and they will naturally help push that for you.
Yeah, really good. I think that idea of thinking of social media as a social place, therefore you should be sociable in that place too, by being welcoming, by opening up conversations, by speaking into somebody else's business. If you want them to come and like your page, go and comment on their page. Comment on your local bakery's Facebook page saying, hopefully you're doing well in the community, how can we support you? That kind of thing. You have to be as sociable as you want everybody else to be towards your platform as well. Do either of you want to say anything else about platforms while we're on that? About Facebook, YouTube, websites, that kind of, anything you want to particularly highlight that might be helpful?
I noticed a question about should we be pointing people to our websites and how much should we be doing that? Websites are still helpful, and having a good it's that a shop window of that. The reality is people won't spend much time there, so it does need to show who you are and do that, but people won't spend time there. One of the things of social media and not social media, but yeah, YouTube videos or anything, I'm sure some of you at least, have you ever found yourself in a YouTube black hole or a Facebook black hole where you just end up watching some videos or video after video and can spend a bit of time on there? That a lot of people get caught up in that. They watch a few videos and people are willing to watch 15-minute videos. It's no longer that you have to grab their attention for 30 seconds. That's all you've got. People are now used to watching 10, 15-minute videos. And so if it was a engaging testimony or something, you could have that on there and people may well watch it. You don't now have to worry so much about that. We only have 10 seconds to grab attention. And actually a testimony video, if you have someone that gives an engaging story, it can be as simple as just a straight film it, get it up on your YouTube page or whatever, share it on social media and share someone's story of what's happened. And that's no editing, no anything else. You just film it, put it up there, and it's done.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Hannah?
I feel I sort of just want to kind of acknowledge Sue's comment on it all takes a massive amount of time. So many of those here will be doing most of the stuff themselves. Yes, and that is a challenge. But again, it's finding people who can support in online stuff. You know, not that exclusively find a young person, but are there young people that you could, or anyone who's interested in digital, actually you know, help you with it. Thinking about platforms, like again, as Ben said, like websites are the best place. That's your land as such. So making sure that it's up to date with lockdown and varying rules dependent on you know, when in the year we are and what's happened and what the rules and regulations are. So just making sure that actually your latest information is on there, you know, what's happening, and also direct them to social. So the website, you can't really have that social interaction, but it's great to put everything on there, but direct them, say, if you want to chat with us, if you want to connect with us, here's our Facebook page and link to that. But also, so some of the client work that I do with churches is kind of auditing their platforms and stuff. And one of the things I've noticed recently is they'll put it kind of either or, so they'll put it on YouTube, but then either one, they don't direct people to the fact that the videos are on YouTube via the other platforms, or they won't upload them at the same time. And I think actually, though it does double the work and sort of almost split the analytics, actually just putting everything everywhere is the best, because Facebook don't like it if you're pointing people all the time out of Facebook. But some people have YouTube and don't have Facebook, or vice versa. And actually it helps to enrich your platform and your profile and sort of your value to people. And if they're constantly having to go out of Facebook somewhere else to watch the videos, it's just sort of one more thing for people to do. So kind of just putting it everywhere, wherever possible.
Yeah, just to acknowledge a few of the comments. It's, as Derek said, there is actually, obviously in church we often have a lot of retired people have more time, and you will find that there will be people that will be very good at this as well. And so having that, and as Jim said, actually one of the best things you can do is get all the people in your church who are on these things, going to them, and just, if you're wanting to share a video with your community and reach out, what you need to do for the algorithm's sake is get everyone in your church to like it and share it. And if you've ever watched YouTube videos, which get very annoying when they're like and share and subscribe, if everyone in your church does that, your message will actually go out quite far. And when people do that, you will see that it says, you know, a couple of thousand people have seen this video just from your church, just sharing it. So actually, sometimes if you have a message, it might be one particular one, it might be general. If you have something to share with your community to say, this is a great story, or this is something we want you to know, sometimes it is doing those things which seem like annoying online things and saying share and like and do that. Excuse me, that's my doorbell.
But also, like, one-click evangelism is the easiest way for the congregation to share their church message without them physically having to say anything. They don't have to stop the woman in front of the QNLD if they, you know, if she wants prayer, or having to stop the dog walker. Actually, just liking and sharing a video or a post, or just saying, hey, this is my church's page, is like the easiest thing to do for someone in their congregation who doesn't quite feel comfortable in sort of publicly writing something themselves.
Very good, thank you. I think another helpful thing to think about there is, all churches are different, but in lots of local churches, we would think about some of our volunteers who have got time, and we would look at their certain personalities and skill sets and think we can train them. You know, we can give them competence, but they've got character, they've got the charisma that we want. So there could be people in your church who don't have the skill right now to understand algorithms and all that stuff of Facebook, but they've got a great kind of way of speaking, way of communicating. They're really kind of positive in the way they speak on social media, which not everybody is, we know. So I would say, just as you would think about maybe training them how to be a good host at church, to be on the door and be a good welcomer, think about training them how to be a good welcomer on social media, because you can give them the competence through a bit of training and time if they've already got the kind of character and the heart that you're looking for. So it's just some simple thinking around giving some people training. You know, you could meet with a few of your people on Zoom for an hour and just say, could you help us with social media by just doing this online? We think you're great at it, and we'll just give you a few skills to do it. That could actually make a huge difference to them and your algorithms and all that stuff as well. Or if you're doing, you know, Zoom calls or YouTube services, have online host team like you would have in church. Just train a few people to turn up early, to reply to people's comments, to text people afterwards when they said they needed prayer. Those kind of things, what we would do in person, that is where you can replace those things online or complement those things by thinking the same. But we just assume sometimes, because we're hosting the service on Zoom or whatever, that it's all about us. But actually, you could easily have a team on Zoom or on your online services or on your social media to do that.
Yeah. Just to say about you said about positivity online not often being there. There was an earlier comment about hecklers in comments. And it is an interesting one, and it's a decision you'll need to make of how you respond to. But online is a front line that we're going into. And in that, there will be things that come against it. There will be some opposition, and it's how we deal with that. Now, some people are coming at that because they're struggling with something themselves. And so actually being able to let them voice that and respond to them in a good way actually can really show something. Obviously, we know there are also people online who just want to make life difficult for you. And so sometimes it might be having to make a decision of blocking something or blocking comments on a certain thing if there is an issue going on there. But actually, we had one on a morning service recently of someone saying Christians don't ever engage in real issues and all this sort of stuff. And so it was kind of, well, how do we respond to, how do we say that what they were actually looking at that point was a worship service, but we do lots of other stuff as well. And so did do a reply, probably too late. We didn't do it right at that moment. We did it a bit later on, partly because we were live. But actually that's the thing of having people being able to respond to this. And as I say, it is a front line, and in those front lines, we should expect to find some sort of opposition, and it's how we respond to that in not a starting an argument way. Yeah.
Very good. There were some questions before about, like, if I could summarize them, there's kind of like questions about metrics, like should we be looking at Facebook views? Should we maybe promote social media posts to kind of get those numbers? I wonder if we should just think a little bit around that kind of vision for digital mission and whether that is measured purely in kind of numbers of views, or whether we should think of it in a different way. How do we measure engagement rather than just numbers? I don't know if we want to just think around that for a few moments. I can open up with a thought if you like, because I think one of the things we as church leaders in particular is so tempting, isn't it? Not only to check every week how many views you had on YouTube or whatever, but also to see somebody else's and see how does it compare to the church down the road or my friend or whatever. There's a huge temptation. I think one of the challenges we've got with digital mission is to think about what our desired outcomes are, and therefore what metrics match best with that. So if your vision for online content is mass exposure, then views can be really helpful, or clicks can be really helpful, or promoting content can be really helpful. But if your overall goal is discipleship, and true discipleship, leading people into discipleship, then actually measuring views can be incredibly disappointing. But a video could have 50 views, but 48 genuine engagements that lead to something helpful. And therefore, if that's your metrics, that's incredibly successful. Or it could have 1,000 views and no responses, just purely content consumption. So I think having a vision for what you want your digital to actually achieve, and therefore making that the metric that you measure. For example, just in our context, this is just one example. Our carol service at Christmas, we knew it would be our probably highest viewed service, for like it would be for many of you. We decided the metric we would try and use for how successful it was, quote, successful, was how many alpha signups would we get. So in January, when we launched Alpha Online, we could reflect on how many people have signed up for Alpha through one of our services. And what that made us do was, in our carol service, we had to think about who in the chat and who on the video is promoting Alpha and making it as easy as possible for people to sign up for Alpha. So we used QR codes, we used links, we had an online event that you could sign up for and it would automatically email you the link for Alpha. We tried to make it as simple as possible because that was our desired outcome. So I have no idea what the views were on that. I can tell you how many people we're doing Alpha with now from that. So I don't know if either of you guys want to share anything about how we kind of match up our online presence, our digital mission with a vision, and how we measure that, if anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think it's similar questions we should be asking of the physical stuff we do. So we might have a group, whatever that group is, that lots of people attend, but we're not actually seeing any fruit from it. And obviously, when we look at that in our church, we say, well, is there something we can do differently, or do we need to? And what we'll often look at is what is the flow from that group. So we have some things that just link to people, toddler groups, people will just come to, link with, and we make relationship at that point and link it to something else. And I think it's the same with online stuff, that we do get uncomfortable sometimes, I think, when we look at numbers and metrics and flows and all sorts, but it's what we sometimes have to deal with. But what is the flow? So if you've got some sort of online service, or how are people connecting from that? Or if you're, whatever it is you're putting out there, what is the step that people can take? So for you, Tom, it was sign up to Alpha, and the step was then coming to Alpha, and you can see the progression in that. But I think it's the same questions we do ask. If we have so many bums on seats, it doesn't matter if they're not progressing in their faith journey, and it's a similar question for online, but often the numbers we get are bigger, and sort of the funnel is wider. We bigger without with only seeing a fewer come through, probably. Hannah, anything else?
Yeah, I think looking at sort of since lockdown, suddenly everyone's numbers sort of shot up, and everyone was sort of really encouraged and like, wow, we can get hundreds of views for a Sunday service. I think kind of by Easter it peaked, and then as the weather got better, you know, people kind of were getting into a routine of what we were and weren't allowed to do, or actually just as the regulations eased off a bit, views and probably general engagement kind of went down a bit. And it was one thing that, as someone who manages my church's social, I had to really take on board, of to be like, oh, it's not really anything we've done wrong. Suddenly people are sort of really disinterested in watching our services. It's just actually, you know, lifestyles that suddenly people are a bit like, oh, maybe I don't have to watch this right now on a Sunday. There are the things I can do. I have tried to say to the churches that I work with, of like, try not to get that screen envy of seeing someone else's service. When we're all in the buildings, it's easy to kind of ignore what the church down the road's doing, because you can't see like behind the walls what's going on unless you're in there. And I think kind of where now they literally could be on the post right underneath you. They've got 4 camera angles, they've got smoke machines and fancy lights and, you know, a whole band. And it can be really disheartening, but it's actually going, you know, what is it that my congregation, my audience, my community, what do they want? And I think, yeah, Tom, as you say, that actually thinking about the vision and the intentionality of where you want to be and how you're going to get there. I think insights are really valuable of giving a kind of indicator, but more as an indicator for your posts. So saying, actually, the shorter Sunday services have seemed to be a bit more popular lately. Okay, let's try and maybe like bring down the services that are going online, because people don't want to sit for an hour and a half and watch something that they can't really engage in. Actually, the midweek video of the testimonies, or the kind of like what's going on this week, that's been really good. Oh, people really like when we share a Bible verse, and that's had really loads of shares. It's kind of use the insights to analyze your activity, not use it as a comparison to see what someone else is doing. But it is really hard. And actually, personally, it's a challenge that I have of kind of constant going, oh, they have more likes than I do. But just sort of own who you are, and, you know, just try to improve what you're doing, but don't get too pent up about, oh, they've got hundreds of views and actually ours only had 50. That, as you say, that could be 48 sort of follow throughs and engagements, and, you know, wonderful fruits coming from that. Try to see it like that more than the numbers.
Yeah, you said there about, well, in terms of thinking of practical ideas of how we can actually go about this, there's, I think, one way, particularly in outreach and in connecting to our churches, but story is really important. Now, we mentioned about possibly testimony videos. Now, Tom, I know you've done a lot of interviews as well, and have you found that there's been more connection through that?
Yeah, so we would include like an interview maybe in a service, or like an online service, but we would then clip that bit out of the service and use it in the middle of the week, maybe as like as a taster or like a snapshot. So most weeks we would we're pre-recording. So, you know, Friday we would post a 1-minute clip from the sermon of like a taster for people to sort of way of reminding people it's coming up, and then midweek the following week, maybe Tuesday, and a different clip from like an interview or prayer or something to kind of share that. But yeah, it's just different voices as well. Mm-hmm. And just like how in church life, we've all experienced, haven't we, where someone says something in your church that you've said 1,000 times and people connect with somebody else saying it. And you think, I've been saying that for like 10 years. Or sometimes when the nurse in your church or the young person in your church says something about what they've liked or not liked about lockdown, or whatever, it just connects with people in a different way. We all have different voices. So yeah, the more you can kind of vary that up, the better. But again, that's about taking that stuff that's already happening online church, if you like, and using it for digital mission. That's starting to think about that hybrid thing. The quality of that interview wasn't just for our people; it also gives other people, potentially who aren't part of church, insight into what we're thinking about, what we're praying about, and what matters to us, what's going on. So it's thinking of your content. Having actually the benefit we've got at the moment is our content can be reused like never before. We can maximize its potential. Obviously, you want to be careful with that. You don't want to flood social media with like you just talking about stuff, but well-crafted kind of use of content can be really helpful. Yeah, I think that whole thing of just thinking about your digital work as being cohesive with your church vision, what your church is for. Every church has a unique identity and a unique call in their community. So if your vision as a church, for example, is to love Derby, if that's where you are, your vision is love Derby, then what does it mean to do that on Facebook and on your website and on YouTube and whatever? And ask yourself, in a sense, how are we going to measure whether we've loved Derby or not? It probably isn't if 1,000 people have clicked on the video for 3 seconds or more. That doesn't tell you if you've loved Derby or whether they've experienced that. So it's thinking about what outcomes could we measure and how could we engage in that and see it. Of course, they're harder to measure than views, which is why the views hit us every week. It's literally underneath the video every time, isn't it? This is how it's doing. But YouTube are measuring your success by how many people click on your video. That's what they care about because that's how they get money. You don't have to measure it the same way as Google and YouTube. That's the reality of it. Ben, one of the things you mentioned before, Ben, we can use digital has potential for community, for evangelism, but you also said discipleship. I wonder if you want to just think about that for a few moments. What does it mean for digital mission to be a discipleship space? So again, not just discipleship of who we already are connected to, but beginning the process of discipling people even on the outside of the church. Any thoughts?
I think it's the harder one online, because we do want to be creating that connection, which we often get more in person. As I said, it does open doors for things like where people couldn't come to your building. So we're doing a teaching series at the moment, which is obviously purely on Zoom, but even if we were back in the building, the evening one I would remain on Zoom because it's easier for people to actually get to. So it opens doors to be able to do more with your church potentially sometimes, or to provide another option. But I think you'd also expand that to potentially more as well. So we're about to do an online alpha, you're doing one at the minute, Tom, but for the same reason, it might mean people are quite comfortable in their house and being able to log on to something and find out more about something. And that might be the next step. And you would hope at some point there is a step that brings them to meet you face to face, because without that, we know there's something missing, like without that connection that we long for at the minute. But that step might be an extra step between that now, and providing those online forums where that can happen, whether that is a course that's run or just starting to build, if you are chatting with someone online or something and being able to build that relationship. There's certainly one person who's joined us during this, that's gone on to some stuff and started commenting on things, and we've had a bit of interaction with, and now would see themselves kind of as part of the church, and we still haven't properly met them face to face, so we're waiting for that to come. But I think it's an extra step on that journey, but obviously we recognize the need for that connection as well.
Yeah, very good. Anything you want to add to that, Hannah, about that kind of element of discipleship and how digital mission can be part of that?
There's so many thoughts. I think one of the things I was chatting with someone the other day about was, but if you're meeting in a group, so when we've had like our house group was meeting, if it would only be on a Wednesday evening when I can see them and talk with them, I've forgotten by Friday what we were chatting about, and if I've got any questions following what we had discussed, I'll have forgotten those questions, and even the questions following those questions by the time the following Wednesday comes. Whereas by having however means works for people, whether that's a WhatsApp group, Instagram, direct messaging, Facebook groups or whatever, actually having, if we can meet physically on a Wednesday, great. And then having a space to ask the questions or go, oh, I'm a bit confused about that. How do I, can someone help me clear this up? Having a space where people can ask those questions and actually just be encouraged and support people like each other. Again, it's not about the either or, but actually it's a space where we can still learn just as much as we were or are when we're meeting in person. And I think it's using it as a space where people can feel comfortable to share, and it not excluding those who maybe aren't seeing everyone all the time, like how we used to be able to.
Yeah, and I think there's a point in there about remembering that your format will dictate how things are. And you'll have found that at the moment, however you do church, if it's on Zoom, it means probably your level of fellowship and connection with others in the church is higher, but it's more exclusive. If you're online, it's perhaps going wider, but you maybe lack that connection side. And so remembering all these things, it is asking that question at the beginning, what are we wanting to do? And so if you're wanting to make more connections with stuff, maybe something like Zoom is a better format. And so like Hannah says there, actually for that, having a WhatsApp group for a small group, or having some sort of forum where you can keep up with each other will be more intimate, but more exclusive, which is okay. It just depends on the context you want stuff in.
Yeah, and I think it goes exactly back to what you said earlier, Ben, about the lines of that flow for people with discipleship has to be even more clear than it was before, and it has to be doable in the moment for the person. So I would encourage people to really think about how that works for them. So, for example, if your priority, what you would love to see happen is people joining your house groups or connect groups or small groups or whatever you call them, if that's what you would love to see happen, because then they're in a discipleship context that's doable in lockdown, then how can they do that? How are you making it possible for them to do that? So is there a way on your website within one click that someone can sign up for a Connect group, or make it clear that they want to and for you to follow up? If that's what you want to achieve, then that's what you want to do. And can you make it possible that at the end of every online service, or at the end of every Zoom call, or a coffee morning, or anything you're doing, that flow is available? So again, in our context, we use the Carol service to get people to Alpha. Now on Alpha, we make it we do Alpha on Zoom. Every session, the link goes in the chat for how you can sign up for a Connect group. And we've had people sign up for Connect groups, go to a Connect group without us having to actually do that. Or we use a software to do that, which obviously is, we've invested in that. But now we're in a situation where, as soon as we're allowed, we'll be baptizing people and coming into membership who have never been to our church building, but they've been in a Connect group for 6 months and they've done Alpha. Which, if in pre-COVID world, someone had done Alpha, kind of been in a Connect group for 6 months, come to faith, and was asking to be baptized, it would be a logical, we'd see that as a good discipleship journey. That's still possible online, but you just have to make it much easier for that to be a one-step thing. Have a plan of how are people going to do Alpha, how are they going to do Connect group, how are they going to get to our coffee morning, whatever it is for you. So that cohesion with your vision and strategy offline, making that cohesive with what you're doing online, your message is consistent, that we value Connect groups, or we value Alpha, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Just, I've got a bit of a question for Hannah, I think. So we said about our social media things, not just pointing to the Sunday service or trying to get people to that. And I think our Facebook was definitely guilty of that before. And we looked at the beginning of last year, how we might change that. That was slightly interrupted by everything that happened. But what sort of things would you say? I mean, you've talked to some churches about it. Like, what are we putting publicly on that that's not just come to our service on Sunday on our social media channels?
So like practical, actual ideas. Oh, so many. So as I said already, like I think there's for one, it's a balance of thinking church and faith sort of focused stuff. So asking people, you can ask in a group or on the page of like, actually, what's your favorite worship song, or what new worship songs are you loving? Doing something that is a call to action that's not about here, come to the Sunday service. So doing things like that, what Bible verses are you loving at the moment? What's what not are you loving? What's been challenging for you? What Bible studies are you doing? And so kind of those things are very much call to actions and asking questions, and they prompt a response from your audience. You can then offer kind of value content of, here are some resources. So have you tried the YouVersion Bible app, because they've got the sort of daily devotionals, Bible studies, and hundreds of thousands of different versions of the Bible. So for actually learning, it's great. Then a prayer mate is actually a really sort of cool way to kind of format your prayer life. Things like Lectio 365, 360. An app like that, because actually you're not then advertising your service or necessarily, but it's a way for people as well to kind of develop their faith journey. But actually you're sharing resources that are just great to kind of, if we're trying to not encourage people to be online, but if we're online, let's try and point them to kind of some good stuff. So that's kind of, faith-focused things. And then actually, as we said already, engage with your community. Actually, is there a local coffee shop that serves really good coffee and you want people in the community to know about it, because it's a independent place, and actually we should all be doing our bit to support small businesses. Actually, can you share a post that they do, or sort of say, great to have a takeaway coffee and walk around the block as our daily exercise or something. So you kind of look to see what's physically in the community that you can share. If there's like partner organizations or charities, so I'm thinking kind of personally about the charity I also work for, that we're doing some social action work. So I do share a bit of from the church account, I share that charity's work, but also thinking about kind of churches together, or I do worship sort of Anglican, so I share the diocese, but also the Baptist associations, and actually kind of look at sort of content beyond yourself, because if you have your content schedule, but actually if you can kind of like in between provide stuff that you don't even have to think about producing, you just have to think about, right, I'm going to look up 3 different accounts, and if there's something worth sharing, I can share it. That again doubles your output without you having to do half of it. So yeah, but also kind of again understanding the platforms and what's the type of thing that the audiences want to see. So if you are on Instagram, or sort of, you know, the more visual platforms, actually, could you just post a nice picture and say, hope everyone's having a lovely day? You know, there's no agenda and there's no kind of trying to sell something. Just be a smiling, encouraging face for someone to go, oh, actually, I just really needed that today because it's been a really tough day. Or sort of, you know, something nice, encouraging. I think, yeah, with everything going on, I think that's kind of where, if you're struggling for things to post, just put something encouraging and cheery.
Yeah, great.
And if you want to be super cynical, I'm aware this is being recorded, but if you post something like what's your favorite pizza topping and it gets lots of engagement, your next post, which might be our service, will get much higher engagement, because that's how algorithms work on Facebook. So you can actually be quite intentional about that. If you want to get really kind of intense, you can kind of post something to get lots of engagement and then use that as an audience.
So something like a pizza topping is a very dangerous question to ask.
Yeah, for sure.
You could have some domestic arguments there.
So, just a quick last couple, there's a couple of questions that have come in. Is there anything problematic in valuing non-physical gatherings at the same level as physical gatherings? My quick response to that would be, I think what I would say is thinking about digital mission is about valuing evangelism, discipleship, community, the same online as you do in person. But actually, maybe your flows, like Ben said before, maybe they need to have an in-person step in them at some point. But it's not about valuing online or in person more or less. It's about valuing connection, discipleship, community, evangelism, and online being one way in which you can do that. So I think the danger we have more is probably undervaluing the potential to disciple someone over Zoom, or undervaluing the potential to connect with someone or build friendship or community, or even just community kind of awareness online. The danger is we undervalue that rather than...
I think if we, going to the kind of church as family analogy, there's different levels which we engage with our family. I live far away from mine, so I often connect by messaging and by FaceTiming, things like that. At the moment, that's all I can do. Obviously, at some point, I try and meet them because that's really important. The closer you are to someone, the more you'll be trying to meet them and do that. And you get obviously to the point of you're married and you're, seeing someone every day, but you might still message as well during the day or anything like that. And nothing's taken away from that, but we recognize the need for that physical connection as well. So it's that thing of the closer you are, the more you would kind of expect that there would be that connection there. But the fact that I haven't physically seen my family for ages makes me no less part of that family. And I'm still connecting in that way and doing what I can in connecting with that. And so it is different, but it's not quite its fullness, but it is. But yeah.
And then this last comment here, just one last one to finish with. This feels like we are selling to consumers rather than trying to build meaningful relationships. It can absolutely feel like that, because it can feel very kind of strategic and very kind of processy, and we'll talk about flows and stuff. But that comes down to values, I think. If the value is that we want to build relationship, that relationship has to start somewhere. And for some people, that will start online. For some people, that will start with liking a Facebook post that can be responded to, that someone can do alpha, that someone can do. So the people who then in that space, then you've got to think about, how do we build a relationship? It's not purely a process, but there has to be a process so that you can then build the relationship. And there has to be a starting point, and that's where some of the strategy can come in. It doesn't replace having a phone call with someone or meeting somebody. They complement rather than replace, I think, is how I would see that. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Hannah, as the last thing before we wrap up.
No, I would agree. And yeah, it can feel like that sometimes, but I think in the same way, we kind of have to think strategically about how we do, maybe not Sunday services, but there is a sense of strategy and plans and intentionality with how, when we physically meet. And I think it's kind of the same, it's in a different way, but actually it's yeah, if your intention is to have that relationship, there's nothing wrong with putting kind of like seeds of hope in with what you're doing. And I didn't mention it actually in the beginning, but another thing that I have kind of tried to use when thinking about social is we're called to be salt and light. And actually, if we're not in social, I mean, it's a hugely negative space anyway, but if we as Christians, both individually and as churches, aren't there, you know, who knows what it's going to end up being. And I think we've just got to share the love of Jesus on it. And however that is for each individual church and person, that's, you know, up to you. But I think that's sort of, we have got to be there.
Yeah, right. Maybe I'll just finish with a story before you guys share your last thing, just to kind of give that personal, show how it is personal. So I gave the example of our carol service. One of the people who joined up for Alpha was a lady called Penny, who I'd never met. She'd never connected with our church before. She signed up for Alpha at the end of our carol service. I've got to know her since we've done Alpha through January. Last Sunday, she gave her life to Jesus during the Alpha service on Zoom. And then tomorrow, I get to meet her one-to-one on Zoom to just chat through what discipleship could look like for her moving forward. She's signed up to be in a Connect group. All of that has happened online. So she signed up for a group for our website. She signed up for Alpha through a link from our carol service. But tomorrow I'm going to meet her in person, one-to-one, and say, like, this is amazing what's happening for you. You're now part of our church family. How can we walk with you? And as soon as we're allowed, we're going to do baptism and have you around for dinner and all that kind of stuff. But if we didn't have the invite at the end of the carol service that had an intentional discipleship opportunity, she wouldn't have done Alpha. And she wouldn't have come to faith, and she wouldn't be in a Connect group, and I wouldn't be speaking to her on Wednesday. We still would have never met. And so it's not about kind of having this kind of perfect linear process. It's about what hooks, if you like, what spaces can we create where we are present so that we can actually be who we're called to be. If you want, you can create a process where you never speak to Penny, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a place where we create an opportunity to actually speak to her. And some of you will have amazing stories of how that's worked as well. Hey, to finish up, Hannah first, if you could give people just kind of one thing, one step that everyone, all of us could take today, what would it be? What would be your one step? I'll mute first.
Sorry, I'm mute.
Yeah, sure.
I was going to say, oh, it's not really one, but try. Explore, experiment, you know, just try the different platforms and different types of content. You know, as with church, we're all different within the church, we're all different churches, different people within a congregation and a community. What works for some churches won't work for you, and you could find that something that hasn't been used before shows great fruit for you. Just build community, create content to inspire, engage and challenge. Don't just broadcast, but be social, and have fun with it, actually.
Really, Ben?
Yeah, I think taking away, there's loads of ideas thrown out today, but perhaps what is the one that, obviously trying the different things out, but what is one thing that you could do that you can, you can continue? So if it's saying every week we're going to put out a testimony, fine, do that, but is that something you're going to continue? Or if it's just, we're going to make sure we respond to comments and actively do that and find that person who can do that. Just maybe just starting with the one thing that's going to continue in that as you're trying out the different stuff, and just, yeah, engaging with those comments so that you're creating that connection. Yeah.
Lots of wisdom you guys have. Thank you so much for sharing. Hey, I'm going to pray for everyone who's present on the call. Pray for you that God would plant in your hearts the one thing that he might be calling you to do, and then maybe Mike or Mark or Nick or someone can wrap us up to finish. Let's pray together just for a few moments. Father, thank you for the privilege of being able to gather on Zoom as family, as friends. We thank you for the church, local and wider. And we thank you that you are still at work. We thank you, Lord, that it's not dependent on us, that we can have all the best strategies, but you are the God who works in people's hearts and lives. And it's by your Spirit that people's lives are changed. So, Lord, help us to understand what our role is and what our role isn't online in this season. For every church, every leader, every community represented here, I pray for wisdom. I pray for a clarity of calling, of purpose and vision. I pray, Lord, that you would encourage every person that what they're doing now is wonderful. It's to your glory. It's an extension of the call on their lives. And Lord, if you have more for them, if you have new things for them to step into, then would you make that clear? Would you call people around them to help them? Would you give them a fresh vision for what it could look like? And we pray, Lord, for more stories, more examples of people finding you and finding home in the church through our digital mission, through our online purposes. Thank you, and bless Ben and Hannah as they've shared with us. Encourage them and use them in mighty ways to build your kingdom. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Mike.
Ben, Tom, Hannah, we are so grateful to you for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and your passion as well for mission online. That came across really loudly and clearly to me. It's great. I did tell you folks that it would be stimulating, and I, for one, have been stimulated and provoked a little bit, and I hope you have too. It may well be that you haven't had your question answered directly. I mean, there were so many that came in the chat room, which is great. I'm going to say a little bit tomorrow, a bit more tomorrow rather, but a bit of a teaser now. We know that these guys are onto something, that our eyes have been opened to the possibility and potential of online mission. And so we want to be supportive within the EMBA. And we're in the end game of developing a package that will help churches that have motivation but need a little bit of encouragement and support, a little package that will help you take the next step. And that package will include the possibility of a free 1-hour consultation with a group of people that we're appointing, digital mission consultants. And Ben here and Hannah are almost certainly going to be one amongst them. And that might be an opportunity for you to ask your question and to do a little bit of reviewing about where you are in the digital scene. It's not compulsory, but if it's a helpful thing for you, it will be free to you at the point of service. And the EMBA will be picking up the tab for that. I'll say more tomorrow, but just for now, I want to say on your behalf, folks, a big thank you to these guys again. We really appreciate you. Thanks.